You can hear
And I
me?
just want to say this is Lauren. Her presentation is Parisian life during the Belle Epoque. And thank you very much, Lauren, for this.
So my presentation is Paris and postcards, and I collect postcards of Paris, and I'm particularly interested in the era that they call the Belle Epoque. So I've chosen some postcards to try to illustrate what life was like there and why that era was so interesting. And so here is a panoramic postcard of Paris and what it looked like at that time. And so the Belle Epoque, that was the years between the Franco-Prussian War and World War I. And it was a time of peace and prosperity in Europe, but it was also a time of great change. And Paris was kind of the showplace for a lot of the new technologies, the new styles, and particularly the new ways of living that were occurring in this era that they called the beautiful era. And so the Belle Epoque, that coincided roughly with the years that we term the golden age of postcards. And that was a time when postcards were an essential form of communication for people. And so stores that sold postcards were plentiful. And as you can see in these two postcards here, these stores were exclusively just for postcard sales. And a lot of the technological advancements that were being made at the time, they made it possible to mass produce postcards. So they were mass producing them to meet the high demand, and they just started producing postcards of everything that they thought would sell. And they produced postcards of everyday life. So I think that's why postcards are a good place to look for what life was like at this time, like this panoramic card of one of the large parks. You can see how people spent their leisure time. Paris was an old city, and it had been a walled city. And because of that, it got very overcrowded, and the population density increased, and there was a lot of disease, dark and dangerous at times. And so these two postcards, they're actually from an exposition universelle that was held in Paris. And they tried to recreate old Paris. And as you can see, you had to enter the city, the old city, through these ports. This old part of the city, the roads were very narrow. It made it difficult for carriages to get through. And these photos and this postcard show how narrow the streets were. And so they weren't really the city couldn't keep pace with the changing times. And so in Napoleon III, he instructed his prefect, George Eugene Haussmann, to give Paris, to open it up and connect and unify the different parts of the city and make it more beautiful. And so here's another panoramic postcard. And large parts of the city were torn down, and uh, new buildings were built, and new streets and park space. Like this is the Rue de Rivoli on the right here, and the Tuileries Gardens. And so, as I said, large areas of the city were removed, and these wide boulevards were built, and they could accommodate, many cars. And then they had large, wide sidewalks on either side, tree lined for people to walk. This redesign, it had the wide avenues intersecting with traffic circles, and they radiated out like spokes of a wheel, and they connected up with the large monuments. And you can see how wide they were. They were able to accommodate all these different, modes of transportation and commercial vehicles. The boulevards connected with the train stations. This is the East Station, and this was the North Station, and that made the city much more functional. And the redesign of Paris, it was basically a marvel of modern infrastructure. It facilitated commerce and the cultural life. And Napoleon also wanted the city to be beautified. And so he instructed housemen to improve the parks like Bois de Boulogne. And he completely remade Bois de Boulogne. You have a wide avenue where the carriages and cars could go. People could ride their horses or just go there to ambulate. And it was beautiful, tree-lined and natural setting. And so there were a lot of activities that could be enjoyed in the parks. Cycling was very popular at the time. So there were chalets to rent bicycles, and there were bicycle festivals that could happen in these park spaces. So Xavier Saget, he is a postcard illustrator who created scenes of Paris life. I collect his cards because many of them are unconventional. Like this one, this gives us a view of the Bois de Boulogne, and it suggests it might not be a safe place to go at night. But a lot of parks were created during the redesign of Paris, and they made Paris a very livable city. You had the larger parks, but you were never too far away from some little park in the neighborhood where was accessible to spend some time out of doors. So Paris was made more functional and more beautiful, but also another unique aspect of Paris was it was known as the City of Expositions, and three universal expositions were held during that time. And so the expositions, they showcased all the latest innovations, commerce, art, and technology. So that made Paris very unique and a place desirable for a lot of people to live and to visit. And this card is a card from the exposition from 1900, which where they actually recreated old Paris. And so that was part of, expositions was to create a whole new unique world and experience. And in the 89 exposition, you know, there was always one big draw for the expositions or one big theme. And for the 89 exhibition, it was the Eiffel Tower. And this is from the program from that exposition. And it was meant to be a temporary structure, but after years of debate, it was determined that they would keep it. And of course, now it's an iconic symbol of Paris. And so postcards played an important role, and particularly the Eiffel Tower was a place where postcards could be postmarked and mailed from the tower. And that made the tower very popular, and it helped popularize the postcard as well. And as you can see, there's a postcard from the 1900 exposition on that postcard. And so expositions brought economic stimulus to Paris, tourism, and the marvels of engineering were a huge draw. As you can see from this card, it must have been very exciting to take in the views from this great height. Permanent structures were also built for the expositions, and for the 1900 exposition, two particular structures that were built were the Gare d'Orsay Railroad Station and the Metro Line 1. And the construction of the metro required extensive engineering, including sinking fabricated tunnels under the Seine. And thousands of workers completed the line in an amazing short amount of time, 20 months. So in this card, you can see the scaffolding for the construction, and that's Place Saint-Michel. And in this card, you can see Place Saint-Michel back here, how close it is to the Seine. And so you can just imagine the engineering feat that must have been accomplished to get tunnels under the river. So here's some more postcards that were produced to showcase the metro. Here you've got the building of the tunnels. Here's an underground station. Here's above scaffolding for building some above ground structures. And then here's a subterranean ticket office. And so the metro's Art Nouveau entrances, they were designed by Hector Guimard, and the Art Nouveau style was also used to design a lot of the buildings that were being constructed at this time. And luckily, these stations, a lot of them have been retained. They didn't get modernized or torn down, and the buildings as well. So the Art Nouveau style is almost synonymous with Paris. And so the metro, it was an instant success. And the network continued to expand from there till 10 lines had been built by 1913. And so you can see if you compare this, the public transportation that was available before the metro, getting on and off, and then the frequent stops, you can see why it was, the streamlined transportation would be instantly successful and people, eager to use it. And so here's another metro station, and I think what the card is trying to showcase is the lighting. And Paris became known as the City of Light because the first electric streetlights were installed in 1878, and that was for another Universal Exposition. And so Paris was transitioning from the gas lamp or gas lighting to electric light. So that must have been a really exciting time to see that transition. And so, with this beautiful city, how were people enjoying it? What did they do for their leisure time? Well, the Champs-Élysées, that was a popular area for Parisians to spend the day. And it had a lot of amenities for the public seeking diversion. And in this panorama, you can see, people uh, taking their carriages there and walking and bicycling. And the avenue had park areas on either side. And you can see back here a metro station. So it was accessible by the public transportation. So there were a lot of activities for adults and children along the park areas of the Champs-Élysées. There were puppet shows and swings for the children, and there was a little rudimentary merry-go-round, and there were go-kart and donkey rides, and those were popular with the children. For you stamp collectors, that was very popular at the time as well. And they had areas where the stamp collectors met up and traded and sold their stamps. I love this card because it actually shows some stamps here. And I only just noticed recently, I'm going to flip back to my previous slide, that I think these are the stamp collectors back here as well, because it looks like those are those same stamps on that chair back there. And then there were places to get refreshments, including some ice cream here, it looks like. And so at the end of the avenue, there are the Grand and Petit Palais, and those were art museums built for the 1900 Universal Expo. So there was a lot of art that was available to Parisians, and Paris, became the artistic capital. But one of the reasons that it became the art capital is because a lot of the artists there, they broke away from the rigid constraints of the Paris Salon, and they started doing a lot of experimental art, and there were different art movements. And so one of the, main art movements of the time, of course, was Impressionism. This particular artist, Louis Abel Truchet, he was an artist in Montmartre, like Toulouse-Lautrec. He did the poster artwork, but he also, there was a 40 card series of impressionistic views of Paris that I managed to acquire. And these are just two of the cards from that 40 card series of impressionistic art from that time period. And so another unique feature of Paris were these ephemera sellers, and they're called the bouquinistes. And I like to collect these cards, and I wanted to include these because these still exist. They're these little green boxes along the left bank, and the dealers sell old books and ephemera. And even today, well, there's a lot of reproduction, postcard and poster art sold, but there's also a lot of ephemera that they sell. And so cafe life, the cafes were the cultural hubs where intellectuals, writers, and artists gathered to exchange their ideas. And so this is one of the very popular cafes at the time, Le Café de la Paix. And so that was, a very important part of Paris life. And they were places, even if you weren't an artist or philosopher, they were just places where people like to socialize and go to see and be seen. And as you can see, many of these chairs are pointing outward so people can watch the people going by. And as you can see, the people going by are looking at the people in the cafe. And so there was a term coined during this time period, and a flaneur, and that was a person who appreciated urban life, and he just liked to wander and observe all the details. And I think this painting by Caballot captures that feeling. And then this postcard, it's just called The Promeneurs. And so it's just showing people just like to walk and stroll and enjoy their beautiful city. And so the French, of course, are well known for their love of fine dining. And one of the iconic restaurants at the time, and it still exists, it has historical status at this time, is Maxime's Restaurant. It was decorated in the Art Nouveau style, and it was a social and culinary center of Paris. Now, these postcards, they're black and white. They don't have any people in it. They don't show the opulence of the place. So I have to turn once again to my illustrator, Xavier Saget, and to get a feel for why this restaurant was so popular. Well, the ceilings were stained glass and the walls had murals, and the owner made sure that the restaurant was filled with beautiful women. So, of course, that gave it quite the cachet and made it a very popular place to go. So we explored a little what the middle and upper class did with their time, but postcards also showed us the working class people at that time. And so here are just some postcards of vendors that were on the streets of Paris selling their wares. And I like to include these two postcards. It shows a street vendor selling souvenirs and also some men that are roasting chestnuts. And these are two things, of course, that are still quite popular in Paris at this time. You have the vendors selling you little statues of the Eiffel Tower, and in the winter, you can still get chestnuts that have been roasted right there on the street. And of course, we have to include postcards. I collect postcards of postcards. And so postcards were being sold on the street as well, as along with maps, ostensibly to all the tourists that were there. So another unique place in Paris was Les Halles, and that was a glass and iron pavilion, and it was the fresh food market. And unfortunately, it was torn down in the 70s. It no longer exists, but it was popular for a huge variety of foods. and proximity to other amenities. And I love this card. It shows all this wonderful vegetables that were for sale. And this card just gives you an idea of what a great hub it was, a hub of activity and a cross section of people. And so images of women were widely reproduced in postcards and advertising at this time. And the Parisienne had come to represent Paris and modernity itself. So here's a postcard with a woman on a bicycle, and this reproduction advertisement also shows a woman on a bicycle. So women were rejecting this idea that their place was in the home, and they were getting out and about. And one of the things they were doing was riding bicycles. And Paris was also the center of fashion, and big fancy hats were all the rage. And so milliners flourished. And this shop wants to let you know that English is spoken there. So they were trying to, attract the tourist trade as well. And some fashions were considered extreme and were widely mocked in postcards. And so here's three here that are making fun of how big the hats were getting, as well as the hobble skirt that was in fashion. And another one here with the big hats and the hobble skirt. And obviously this one hat is so big that it's being used as a parachute. These changes in women's lifestyle, women getting out and riding bikes, playing golf and tennis, that created a change in fashion, and some women were rejecting the tight, heavy clothing and opted for new styles like a pant skirt. And of course, women that were working in factories, they needed to get away from those heavy, restrictive clothing as well so they could work. And so a lot of these new styles that were being adopted, of course, they were celebrated in the postcards. And this one, I think, is trying to show that models were a new thing instead of fashion being put on mannequins. They were having models that were showing the new styles. And working women were profiled in postcards, and women were entering male-dominated occupations. And these were modern Paris coach drivers. And they had to pass the same rigorous tests that men did to become the coach drivers. And then these women were pasting up posters. And of course, that was creating a great sensation. All these men were watching them because previously women weren't doing these kinds of jobs. And of course, at this time, the women were advocating for the right to vote, as women were doing in other countries at that time as well. And these are just two postcards that I think are just really great, showing this group with their great car and their signs and their fashions. I just think those are two wonderful cards. And this card explains what the women were going to vote for to defend the family, combat alcoholism, and prevent war. And so Paris offered a wide variety of entertainment. Obviously, there was a lot going on with the symphony and the theater. But I think the most exciting entertainment that Paris was known for at the time were the cabaret shows. They offered revelry and provocative entertainment. And this is Montmartre. This is showing the Moulin Rouge. Everything looks pretty normal in the daytime. But then this card here is showing that it looks like it's a pretty wild place at night. And so the founders of the Moulin Rouge, they wanted it to be a venue for people to experience the bohemian district of Montmartre. And of course, Montmartre was where the artists lived, and it was where a lot of the free living and lifestyles were happening, and a rejection of the restricted lifestyles. And the Moulin Rouge was the birthplace of the can-can, and it was originally far more risque and would get banned, so they tamed it down for the tourist crowds. And so here's a card that showing that it is a pretty wild dance. And the cabarets became symbols of the city's raucous nightlife, hence where we got the name Gay Paree. And it basically became synonymous with decadence. And these cards are showing the wild times that could be had in Montmartre, which is where a lot of the cabarets were. So this hedonistic lifestyle of the Belle Epoque, with the permissiveness and abandoning social norms, it did have some social downsides, of course. And two more cards showing wild times. And those are illustrations by Saget. And this is a reproduction advertising art. There was a drink that was very popular at this time. Absinthe was also called the Green Fairy, and it was popular with bohemian artists and intellectuals and thought to liberate creativity. There was a whole ritual that was involved with the drink. You dripped it over ice water over sugar cube in a slotted spoon, and it caused a cloudy, milky green, the drink to get cloudy and milky green. And so, but it was a very high proof alcoholic beverage. It was very popular, and Parisians consumed over 36 million liters of it annually by the 1890s. And here you can see that they're advertising that they serve it. And so some artists at the time who painted absinthe drinkers, that was Degas and Picasso. This shows a little bit different viewpoint of what happens to the people when they drink it. It was linked to the development of hallucinations and cognitive decline. Eventually, actually, by 1915, it was banned. It was being considered becoming kind of a social problem. And so that we move on to the French erotic postcard, postcards that were produced. A lot of these erotic type postcards were produced in France, in Paris at this time. And they go from partially clad to all the way nude. And I'm sure this card on the left suggests that there was some level of censorship, but obviously it wasn't very well enforced because a lot of these postcards were produced and Paris or France became rather famous for them. And so they were, they were sold where you in newsstands or postcard shops, but the more risque or explicit postcards were sold more under the counter at bars or tobacco shops. And I included this postcard because it says interesting illustration. So you have to wonder what the men are looking at there. We don't know. But I think where the prohibition or control came was more in trying to send the postcard, because this is an example of a postcard somebody tried to send from Paris out into the countryside, and it kept getting rejected for the indecency, and then it would rack up more postage due stamps every time it was refused. And another controversial part of this era, which might surprise a lot of people, is that prostitution was legal. It was state controlled, and there were registered brothels operating under regulations the workers were examined for venereal diseases, but obviously there still were a lot of venereal disease that happened. And so there were medical advances being developed at the time, like the Institut Pasteur. They were the center of development of microbiology. And it wasn't the Institut Pasteur, it was a bacteriologist, Paul Ehrlich, who developed compound 606 or salvarsan. And that was the first effective treatment for syphilis. And so we turn again to Sage for these postcards because, like I said, he gave us some of the idea of real Paris, what was happening at the time. He made postcards about this compound 606, and it was considered at the time the magic bullet for the venereal disease that, previously they didn't have any kind of treatment for. And so I've tried to give a cross section of some of the things, how life was like during that era, the good and the bad. And that is the completion of my show.
Very nice, Lauren. Very nice. Thank you very much. And your voice sounded great. Did a
Well,
great job.
thank you. Yeah,
Wow.
I was worried the whole time it was going to give out, but I made it through.
Great presentation. Fantastic.
Thank you.
I have a question about one of the cards. It's the card right around where you were showing the windmill, the the Moulin Rouge. And right next to the Moulin Rouge to the left, it almost looked like an Elephant Hotel was there. I mean,
No,
I know it doesn't, but it has this little kiosky thing on the top, and it looks so much like one. It's just, I know there never probably was one there, but
I'll have to go back and give it another look.
yeah,
I hadn't
yeah,
noticed that.
yeah. Anyway, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was wonderful history of Paris. Where did you get those? Did you buy them at those open postcard sales stands in Paris? Some of them?
I got them at different places. Some I did get at the some of the flea markets. There's a dealer in Paris that I bought a lot of cards from. He has a shop. I used to go to the cart expos when they had them. They're not having them anymore. And I get cards online too. Del Camp
I
is close.
remember they had open boursen or sales areas, just like the stamp show you showed. They had them for postcards.
Yes,
Uh-huh. Well, anyway, it's a fabulous collection. Very impressive.
thank you.
I have one of 1890 from the Eiffel Tower that I'm very proud of.
I'm curious about the prices of foreign postcards. I've never collected any from overseas. Are they about the same price, or can you just give us a general idea of how much you pay? I was just curious.
Well, it kind of depends. Kind of depends where you buy them and what they're of. Um, like something like the one with the people on the Eiffel Tower that can get up there. That could be a 50 to $100 card.
Right.
And I mean the ones showing the entrances to the metros, those can be like 30 to 50 euro cards. And so a lot of them, I would say like 30 euro cards. Yeah. But some can get it, and it depends, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Lamenting.
I'm just lamenting that you're right. Yeah, the shows are gone. There's not as much availability. I should have bought more when I was there.
Oh, yeah. Me too. Me
Yeah,
too.
but
You
Well-
mentioned you mentioned that you can buy it on Del Camp.
Yes.
you're lucky depending on the states in United States, Del Camp bans us. I'm
Wow.
Maryland, I cannot buy from Del Camp. They say because it's too complicated for the sale taxes. I had even a store in Del Camp for because I collect Italian postcard. I cannot buy on Del Camp directly.
Oh, I have bought from them
Yeah,
recently,
we
as
are in
recently as
California, so it's
yeah.
depending on the states.
Huh.
I don't know how they manage because every state in the United States has sale taxes.
Yeah,
And so I don't know how they manage to decide, but there are a couple, I don't know, 10
that's
states at least where you can't, if you reside there, you cannot do that. So sometimes I ask my friends in England to buy for me and then mail them to me. Maybe now I can ask you to buy a
Well,
specific card because I can
maybe,
see them, but I
yeah,
cannot buy them.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
there are many early French and other early European postcards in this book called The Postcard Age Selections from the Leonard Lauder Collection. So I recommend it's not a cheap book, but there's some wonderfully reproduced cards there.
I
Some
know
great cards.
I have all his books, and whenever I get one that's in there, I t say to myself, I have that card. And so I have some that are in that book. Yeah.
Lauren, do you find a lot of reproduced modern cards of those old cards that are being sold as if they were original, but they're not?
Um, I only a few times have I seen that. I don't run into that very often.
It's very easily, you can be easily tricked by that,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I mean, if they're not explicitly saying that they're, a lot of times they won't say they're, vintage or whatever. And then I look at it online and I look at the back and go, oh yeah, that's a reproduction. Next,
Yeah.
moving on. But I've not, I don't think I've seen that many that try to pass a card off as old when it's not.
Hmm.
Lauren, I noticed in the background, deep in the background of the one card with the double-decker bus, it looked like there was a Ferris wheel, but is that what that was?
Yeah, I just had to limit the length of the program. That was one feature, one structure that was designed for one of the expos. It's called the Grand Roo, and it's a huge Ferris wheel. And it was designed to, of course, the original Ferris wheel was, the in a Chicago exposition. I forget which. I I had a whole slide about that, and then I couldn't include it because there was too much stuff. But it was a big Ferris wheel, and it had these huge carriages on it that could, I think it was like 36 carriages that could hold a lot of people. Um, and there off and on has been a big Ferris wheel in Paris, not the original one, obviously, but there was a big Ferris wheel that was built for one of the expositions. You'll see that in a lot of French postcards.
Thank you. And I also noticed you don't show the backs of any of the cards, but are there any great messages on any of those cards or any great stories of
Well, most of them don't. I'm kind of a condition nerd, so I tend to try to get cards that haven't been posted. Um, and then, of course, a lot of the messages would be in French, and then the handwriting. And, I did take French and everything, but I haven't taken the time to try to translate many of them.
thank
So,
you.
If you need help, I am fluent in French. I can, if
oh,
you can
well, thank
send
you.
me the copy,
Yeah,
I can try. Handwritten is not always easy.
yeah. I, you know, I've tried to read the backs of them. I know I know that interesting messages come up time and again. I was just reading the back of one, not for this program, but it was woman who was writing about a cruise that she was taking, many around this era. And somebody had died and they got a burial at sea. I thought, wow, that's quite the message there. That would be, you know, kind of awful.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Very nice. I'll
Okay.
give your voice a break.
Thank you.